Just in case you've been living under a rock, the Nintendo Switch 2 has now officially been announced, and Nintendo stated at a recent shareholder earnings Q&A that they are trying to avoid some of the missteps that plagued the launch of the Switch 1, specifically scalpers. I found this over at The Verge. They used machine translation in order to find this information. So, as always, keep in mind that translating from Japanese to English comes with some problems, and using automatic translation almost always loses some nuance as to what was actually said, but that's what we have for now. Usually shortly after Nintendo releases like the communications at a Q&A like this, they will release the English version translated later that has all of the nuance that we're probably missing in this particular translation from The Verge. Shuntaro Furukawa, who's the president of Nintendo, said this: "As with the Nintendo Switch, we believe it will not be easy to rapidly increase production capacity, but based on our past experience, we will make preparations to respond as quickly as possible." He had some other interesting tidbits to say, but I'll talk about that stuff after we talk about Nintendo's plan for scalpers. You know, I have to say that I despise scalpers. They ruin everything. They show up with their stupid psychic robots and snap up all of the inventory, leaving us humans to constantly refresh Best Buy or GameStop's website. Then we get super happy when we're able to add the thing that we want to our cart, only to have those hopes dashed just seconds later when the stupid store crashes over and over and over again. Meanwhile, these asshats put the Switch 2 on eBay or Facebook Marketplace or whatever for way more than it's worth, and then other people with too much money drive that price up for everyone else. It's ridiculous, and it's a problem that's been going on in the tech sector for a really long time. I'm sure you remember the chip shortage that caused everyone to fight over PS5s and Xbox Series systems during the pandemic. Personally, I was lucky enough to get an Xbox fairly early on without having to buy secondhand. And then a viewer bought a PS5 and they sold it to me at cost, which was super nice of them. So if you're watching, viewer, thank you so much. And you know what? Speaking of thanks for subscribing, everyone. This channel just hit 80,000 subscribers here on YouTube. And if you haven't done it yet, please do me a favor and click that button. I would love to hit 100K before the end of the year. Anyway, the PS5 I got was a disc version. I didn't actually want a disc version, as I play almost exclusively digital games, but I ended up buying it anyway because I didn't have any other choices other than to wait. Sony and Microsoft, they really didn't seem to do anything at all to try and stop scalpers. And the big box stores like Best Buy and GameStop and all of those other ones, they didn't do anything either. 8 years ago in 2017, I don't feel like Nintendo did jack to combat scalpers either. And you know who else didn't do anything to combat scalpers 8 years ago in 2017? Nintendo. I was super lucky that I was able to get my pre-order in at GameStop. I also had a pre-order from Best Buy just to be safe, and then whichever one showed up first was going to be my Switch, and then the other one went to my son. By the way, interesting fact for you, for those of you that didn't follow the Switch super early on, when it launched in 2017, there were so many people that wanted to play Breath of the Wild, but they couldn't get their hands on a Switch, that the attach rate for Zelda was over 100% for a little bit. Meaning that people were buying the game and then just waiting until they could get their hands on a Switch. Now, so far, I think that there are two companies, just two, that get it mostly right. They're not perfect, but they get it mostly right. And the one thing that they both have in common is that they sell their own stuff through their own stores. Valve is one of those companies, and the other one I'll talk about in a minute. But when Valve announced the Steam Deck, they ran into the same store crashing nonsense that we always seem to run into. In fact, it kept telling me when I was trying to order it, hey, you are trying to buy too much too fast. Look at this message that they just gave me. It looks like you've been attempting a lot of purchases in the last few hours. Please wait a while before trying again. First off, how long is a while? It's not my fault I've been attempting purchases. After many attempts, I finally got my pre-order in. I ended up buying the mid-tier version, the 512 gigabyte one, which didn't arrive until August. But luckily for me, Valve also sent me a review unit of the Steam Deck shortly before launch, so I was able to still make content about it. And I ended up passing the one that I purchased with my own money down to my son. But here's the thing about Valve's launch. Yes, they ran into issues. Yes, their store crashed, but they also did something really smart. They required you to have a Steam account made before their announcement, and you had to have already spent money on that account at some point. This was a great way to cut down on scalpers, but the best thing that they did is they just let us order it and then let our orders pile up and make a queue. That way we could order once the store could handle the hype, and then we didn't have to wait for, say, Best Buy, for example, to announce that they had stock only to get beaten to the punch by a bunch of scalper bots. This is something that I would really like Nintendo to do. I don't even know off the top of my head if Nintendo sells directly from their own store outside of, going to like the New York store or something like that. But I wish that they would. I wish that they would say, all right, you want to buy a Nintendo Switch? You're going to buy it from us. And when you buy it from us, you have to have a Nintendo account that is in good standing and has made a purchase at some point before the actual announcement. If Nintendo did that, I think that they could really cut down on the scalping issue, but I just don't see them doing that because, again, they don't really have their own store. The other company that does this really well, I think, is Apple. They just take your order and then when it's ready, they send it to you. The thing that both of these companies have in common is both Valve and Apple sell directly to the customer, so they can do that. Best Buy, Target, Walmart, GameStop, they might have a one per customer policy, but that doesn't stop the robots from still snapping up everything because they can do things so much faster than humans, and they just have a bunch of different credit cards that they can use to buy these things. And this is absolutely going to be an issue for sure. There's been rumors that Nintendo expects to sell about 20 million units in 2025, and some analysts are predicting that the demand for the Nintendo Switch 2 will exceed 80 million units by the end of 2028, which is more than the original Switch sold in its first 3 years. That number, by the way, was 55.7 million. The Switch 2 is going to sell like crazy, and I think it might actually beat the Switch 1 at some point, which just hit 154 million units, which is just 6 million units away from the all-time highest selling console, the PlayStation 2. All right, so we know that we're going to have scalper problems because Nintendo is partnering with retailers, and I doubt that they're going to have anything real in place to stop the bots. They don't care who buys them, and at this point I'm talking about retailers, not Nintendo. They don't care who buys them, they just want them bought. And so what can we do in order to combat the scalpers? Well, first off, you're going to want to have an account on all of the retailers. So make sure that you have an account on Best Buy and Walmart and Target and GameStop and any others that you can think of. And make sure that you have accurate credit card information set up in those stores ahead of time so that you can move fast once they're available. Second, you're going to want to make sure that you've signed into the app or site that you're using probably about once a week. I don't know about you, but Best Buy and stores like that, they have a tendency to sign me out from time to time and then make me sign back in. I'm sure that it's for security purposes, and I appreciate that, but at the same time, I cannot tell you how many times I've gone to buy something and then that thing is out of stock because I wasn't signed in when I first opened up the app. So that's just something to keep in mind on launch day. Next, there's certain people on social media that you're probably going to want to follow. People like Wario64 and Matt Swider. The whole reason that I was able to get my Xbox Series X was because Matt Swider posted ahead of time when stock would be available, and I was lucky enough to beat the bots just that one time. They somehow get updates of inventory, and then they post links on their stores as soon as they're available. Sometimes Matt Swider posts PS5 stuff the day before so people would know at this time, log into your Best Buy so that you can have your chance to buy this thing. You can also join our community Discord. There's a link in the description down below that like button. Click the like button and the subscribe button while you're there. And there's a channel on there called Now in Stock. And if somebody sees a post that you missed, they might share it in that channel. So turn on like the notifications for just that channel so that you can get a notification on your phone and you'd be like, all right, now I can buy my Switch. Anyway, hopefully those things are going to help you get the Switch 2 if that's something that you want to get. But Furukawa talked about a lot more than just scalpers. He had some other really interesting nuggets of information for us to prognosticate over. Starting with this, he said, dedicated software is important with the launch of a console. I know a lot of people were looking at Mario Kart 9 or whatever Nintendo ends up calling it, and they said, all right, I think that that's going to be a Switch 1 and a Switch 2 game, but I personally don't think that it will be. I think it has to be a Switch 2 exclusive. I certainly don't think the Switch 1 could handle 24 players per race on screen at the same time. I think the Switch 2 would, or the Switch 1 would chug with that. Then there's Metroid. Metroid, I'm not sure if that's going to be a cross-gen game, only because Nintendo announced it like in the first year of the Nintendo Switch 1, and to not launch it on that system is likely to piss off quite a few people. But it also seems like Nintendo is fine leaving the old stuff behind, and I think that's a good move. The other thing about Metroid that I think Nintendo could do is they could do a bundle for the Switch 1 and Metroid, and probably have that to be pretty cheap. We'll talk about price in a second, but probably have that be pretty cheap, and maybe they will sell enough units so that they can break the PS2's 160 million unit mark. Another reason that you don't want to have that backwards compatibility where the Switch 2 games are also running on Switch 1 games, you know, the cross-gen stuff, I think is because what we saw with PlayStation. PS4 to PS5 that didn't even feel like a generational upgrade. I think a lot of that reason is because a lot of the games were still being made for PS4. So the graphics, you know, they weren't all that much better than they were on PS4. And as we have more and more upgrades over time, it gets harder and harder for us to really get wowed by the graphics at that point. A lot of people just said for a really long time, well, I don't really need a PS5 because I could keep playing all of these games that are coming out, and the graphics aren't all that much better, if that makes sense. I think that was, I don't necessarily want to say it was a mistake, because both Sony and Xbox did it and it seemed fine, but I think that was something that Nintendo can look at and learn from. He also said that they don't plan to drop the price of the current Nintendo Switch, which is very disappointing to me. I would really like to see the price on the Switch 1 drop and then have the Switch 2 settle into that $350 price. But I'm betting it's going to be $400 or $450 with a $500 Mario Kart 9 bundle. Anyway, from the NerdNest, I'm Bill. Thanks for watching, and if it's your first time here, please subscribe. Oh, and check out this video before you go. Stay rad. Take it easy.